Good morning. So I am looking forward to next week. It's traditionally our focus for the worship service comes very pointed toward Christmas and the season and the time. I believe we'll have poinsettias on this stage, which is also one of my favorites because it's so beautiful and it's so fun to preach among the poinsettias and to just be a part of a Sunday like this. But also, I believe Jana is working with our children on a special little, beyond just having one song leader, I think we're going to have the kids sing a song, and so I think that will be fun. So a lot of things that are happening. By the way, Jana's not leading that in case someone wanted to jump that. She is organizing, but we're going to have a good time next week with that. So I'm looking forward to next week, but until then, we still sit in kind of the dichotomy of the season. Remember, we started this series a couple weeks ago. There's this dichotomy in the season. Joy, peace are things that are spoken of in songs and are on postcards and all sorts of things during this season. And yet, the dichotomy is this is one of the seasons that has the least amount of joy and the least amount of peace of all seasons that we go through. And it's a dichotomy because we need the very thing we're talking about, and yet we keep on struggling with it because of whatever reason. And it is a joyful, difficult season. And so I've been encouraging you to ask a question, to check in with yourself. Is it well with your soul? How's your soul doing? Is it looking like Jesus? Or is it looking like a product of this world? Now, we all want it to look more like Jesus because it's hard to imagine a stressed out, anxious Jesus. Jesus seemed to have a peace about him wherever he went, and he seemed to have just a way that we all want. But you cannot have the life of Jesus without imitating the practice in the lifestyle of Jesus. You can't have the life of Jesus without the lifestyle of Jesus. That's what we talked a little bit about last week. And I hit on several different themes, but I mentioned that we're going to spend the whole sermon talking about one aspect that Jesus did on a regular rhythm that I believe has been lost in our society and in our churches. It's the rhythm of Sabbath. Now, I know that whenever I mention Sabbath, many of you jump to what you know simply as the Sabbath day, Saturday, as it might be understood. But I want to encourage you at the very start of this lesson, I want to encourage you with this idea. Don't think of it simply as a day. I want you to think of it as a way. Okay, not just a day, but a whole way. This mic is going to be the death of someone here, for sure. All right. Do I give it a try? We'll keep on going. Tim, I'll do the same thing. I'll just grab the yellow mic if it keeps doing this. All right. Sabbath is a rhythm of life. It's a rhythm of life that is inherent. It is built into the fabric of creation. You don't have to read very far in the Bible to see Sabbath show up. Genesis 1 and 2, the creation story, we see that Sabbath shows up. But I want to pause a moment and just give a quick overview of an understanding that Genesis is not the only creation narrative that is given and is offered by this world. You see, everyone is trying to answer two main questions whenever they think about their own existence. They wonder, how did we get here? And why are we here? And every society asks those questions. All right, I'm done with it. So now we're going to see how good I can do with hand holding a mic. We'll go with that. Ooh, I sound better. I didn't think that was... No, I shouldn't say that. Oh! Can you turn my mic back on, please? Jokes from the sound booth. All right, so the two questions that are often asked is, how did we get here? And why are we here? What are we doing here? The difference with the Genesis narrative, though, compared to every ancient creation narrative or even modern creation narratives, is really stark. There's some big differences that happen. So one of which is Genesis is the only creation narrative that says the matter, your body, that kind of thing, matter and body are good, not evil. All other creation narratives talk about how evil physical world is, how it came out of evil or bad intentions. Genesis is the only creation story where women are created equal in the image of God as men are. It's the only one that actually says men and women are equal. All other narratives show a huge disparity between these two. But for our purposes this morning, Genesis' narrative of creation is the only creation narrative that says you are more than simply what you can do. You are more than what you can do. All other ancient stories, whenever they ask these two questions, there is, how did we get here and why are we here? There's a variation of the same idea. You are here because you are made by the gods to work for the gods. All other creation stories, they have a variant of that. You are here to put in your time for them. No hint of a day off, no hint of anything changing. But whenever you turn to Genesis 1 and 2, when you turn to Genesis 1 and 2, what you see is humans are created on day 6 of creation. Now, day 6 is fascinating and important because this is really the final day of creation. I know there's 7 days of creation. We learned that back in our Bibles, but 6 is actually the final day that God was creating something. And then the humans are created on that day. What is their first full day on this earth? What is their mandate? What is their directive? What are they to do? Well, according to the story of Genesis, their first job is to take a break, is to rest. Genesis 2, starting verse 2, says it this way. On the 7th day, God had finished his work of creation, so he rested from all of his work. And God blessed the 7th day and declared it holy because it was the day when he rested from all of his work of creation. I want you to notice something. God called all the other days good, and they are good. But God called this day holy. There's an impact. There's a power behind what God is saying about the Sabbath day, saying it is holy. You see, God didn't rest because he was tired, because he got worn out from creation. He didn't rest because of that. He rested because there is a rhythm that he was creating into the process of creation that needed to be shown and highlighted, that if we don't live by this rhythm, things just don't work out well. Whenever Moses would receive the 10 Commandments, one of them says this: remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath day of rest, dedicated to the Lord your God. That's what the day is about. A day of rest, dedicated to the Lord your God. God calls us to rest. And he gives us rest by giving us Sabbath. This is the same thing that Jesus, whenever he came and walked the face of the earth, this is God himself, God incarnate, he had to remind the people of what it meant, what it looked like to actually live in Sabbath. See, they were taking Sabbath as a list of rules of things that you can't do on this day. And they were making Sabbath be over the people. And Jesus reminds them that Sabbath was made for humans, not humans for the Sabbath. He puts the priorities correct. God wants us to have rest. And I want you to know that nowhere in the Bible does it indicate that God has taken back his gift of rest to us. Now, some might say, well, we don't have to practice Sabbath in the way that the Jews did. You're correct, because we are a new covenant and different things. But I'll tell you, you can't go very long in this life without practicing the Sabbath of creation. You can't go very long in this life because your soul needs rest. If it's going to be the best that it can be, your soul needs rest. Consider it this way. Where did we get the idea of a 7-day work week? Like everything else, it makes sense if you're not familiar with the Bible. Everything else makes sense. You have months that kind of follow, or at least they used to clearly follow a lunar cycle. But if not that, we have days that follow a solar cycle and years that follow the solar cycle. And we can view a lot of things by this kind of rhythm of the cycle of creation. It's great, but the week, what we call 7-day week, well, that only comes from creation. Genesis 1 and 2. Did you know that during the French Revolution, 1790s, they decided they were going to try to get rid of God in any place that they could, and they wanted to amp up productivity. So one of the things that they proposed was, instead of a 7-day work week, they're going to go to a 10-day work week, which means you work 9 days and then have 1 day off. Now, from a production standpoint, this sounds phenomenal, right? Because I did the math at one point, but I didn't write down my notes. So you get so many more work days throughout the year. And so from a production standpoint, this sounds great, but you want to know the thing that they realized very quickly? Almost immediately, productivity declined. So did mental and physical health. They only did this for maybe 2 to 3 months, and they're like, scratch that, bad idea. Here's what they learned. They can thumb their nose at God all they want, but they cannot go against how God created things. And there are so many ways that we could talk about that story, can't we? I mean, so much of our society is trying to say, I don't want to believe in God, I'm not going to follow him. But the thing is, when they go against God and they go against what he has desired in their life, what ends up happening is they are not healthy. They are hurt. They are struggling. But see, I would like to say, well, that's just, that was 1790s, French Revolution. But sadly, we're trying to do the same thing again. How many of you remember a time whenever businesses were not open on Sunday? If you needed something from the store, well, you didn't get it on Sunday. And there's a part of us that whenever that happened, whenever something like Walmart decided to be open on Sundays, there was a little bit of, oh, thank God, because now whenever I need the milk, I can go get the milk on Sunday rather than having to wait until Monday morning. And so there was a level in which some of us were like, oh, man, that's good, that's nice. How many of us would be kind of up a creek without a paddle today if no restaurant was open for lunch? We'd be like, ooh. But do you remember a day whenever restaurants weren't open on Sundays? Do you remember a day whenever it was absolutely preposterous to think that youth sports would happen on a Sunday? Anyone remember that day? Yeah, we remember those days because we don't have those days anymore, right? We have to use our memory bank because the world, the society has been changing and a new kind of normal is happening, a new kind of normal that is grounded actually in pagan creation stories. A pagan creation story in which you do and you do and you do until your soul is just done. Anyone else feel that? See, that's the pagan creation narrative, is that you got to do and you got to do and you got to keep on doing. The new normal is killing our souls. It's wearing us out. And if we insist on living against the grain of creation, then stop complaining when you get splinters. Because when we go against the grain, that's what you get. Jesus never saw the Sabbath as a rule. That's what the Pharisees saw it as. That's what a lot of Christians will even view it as. It's a rule. Jesus never saw Sabbath as a rule. He saw it as a gift. And I want to give you 4 reasons, 4 purposes of the Sabbath that will help you see the Sabbath as a gift. First one's this. Sabbath is a command to take a break. God expects us to intentionally create space in our lives where we stop striving and we remember who's really in charge. We create space, not just for us, but we create space for those around us to do the same thing. That's what the command of the 10 Commandments, calling to Sabbath, it actually continues and says, if you've got slaves, or if you've got workers in your household, you don't make them work. If you've got a foreigner traveling with you, you don't make them work, because the Sabbath isn't just for you. This rest isn't just for you. This rest is for everyone. Everyone needs rest. And so you create space, you create margin in your life for a break. Sabbath is an intentional space to remember and rest in the fact that there is a God, and I'm not him. See, one of the often quoted reasons as to why we don't actually practice Sabbath is because there's just too much to do. I've got too much going. If I took a day off, how many of you have ever heard, well, Satan never takes a day off? Bad example. Do you really want to be like Satan? Like, of course Satan doesn't take a day off. That's what made him Satan. Quit trying to follow him and follow Jesus, who took a break. And a command from God in creation to say, take a break. Here's the harsh reality. There are things that are on your to-do list right now that will still be on your to-do list when you die. Right? There are items in your bucket list that will remain in your bucket the day that you die. And here's the harsh reality. It's okay. The world will keep moving without you. The world does not revolve simply because you strive a little harder. Your family, you may think, wow, man, I got to do this in order to take care of my family. If you aren't taking care of your soul, then you can't take care of your family. Because if your soul is dead, your family will follow. Take a break. See, we buy into the lie that life depends upon us. But here's the deal. When you take a break, you stop striving, you remember who is actually in control of the day, and every day for that matter. You're able to sit within that. So Sabbath is a command to take a break. Number 2, Sabbath is an opportunity to replenish. Sabbath is not just about stopping everything, it's about stopping striving so that we can fill ourselves with the joy of the labor that we've done. In fact, that's what it says in the commandment in Exodus. You have 6 days to work. Be productive on those days. But on the 7th day, stop letting productivity be your God and enjoy the fruit of your labor. Solomon would actually put it this way in a beautiful song about a time for everything. Most recently, it was put into a song by the Byrds. You may know that song. But he wraps up the song with these words. And people should eat and drink and enjoy the fruits of their labor, for these are gifts from God. The advice that Solomon gives us after there's a time for everything, there's a season for everything under the sun. He says, people, they should eat and drink and enjoy the fruits of their labor. Well, you have to take a break to enjoy the fruits of your labor. You can't enjoy the fruit of your labor while you are still laboring, right? Doesn't work that way. You have to take a break in order to do that. But when you do, it replenishes your soul. Sabbath isn't just about the things that you can't do, as the Pharisees thought. Sabbath is about the things that you can't do during the week, but you can do on a day dedicated to the Lord. And no, this is not a honey-do list. See, a lot of us, we have this. It's not just husbands that have this. I know that husbands and wives all share some honey-do lists. But a lot of times what ends up happening is, well, we strive and work, and then on the day off, we are working at home because we have the honey-do list of things that are piling up. And so I'm taking a break from my work that pays so that I can do all the other work. This isn't a honey-do list idea. This is a time to replenish and fill your soul. Now, that might be some honeydews that do that. It's your time to connect with friends, with loved ones, those people who replenish your soul, hobbies even that connect you to the Creator. A brilliant philosopher once said this: don't underestimate the value of doing nothing, of just going along, listening to all the things you cannot hear, and not bothering. Of course, that's Winnie the Pooh, but I think he has a great point. What is your pot of honey? What delights your soul? You see, there are things that we sit in and we can't long for. We can't long enough for it because we know it's the thing that just replenishes my soul. Don't be legalistic on this, because what refreshes your soul may not refresh my soul. And so if I make a legalistic claim of saying, well, you can't play golf on your day off. You can't play golf on Sabbath because, well, that's working. For some of us, it is working. But here's the deal. For some, that's what connects them to their Creator. That's what connects them and replenishes their soul, that they get done with playing however many holes they can play, and they walk away feeling God's presence in their life. For some, it may be different hobbies, different people to be around. Don't be legalistic whenever it comes to the understanding of what it is that fills your soul. Remember, Sabbath is an opportunity to replenish. But it's not just replenish for your sake. It's a day dedicated to the Lord. So if it's just benefiting you, you might be missing something. But rest looks different to each one of us. The third thing, Sabbath is a time to remember. A forgetful soul is a restless soul. You know that, right? How many times have you walked into a room and then you forgot why you walked into that room? Anyone else? Like daily? Maybe multiple times a day? They say that if you walk out the threshold and back in, that you'll have a better chance of remembering. 32 times wasn't enough for me to remember. So I don't know at what point you actually remember the science behind that. But here's the thing. A forgetful soul is a restless soul. Whenever you are trying to remember something, it doesn't give you rest in your soul. This is the only commandment of the Big Ten that starts with the word remember. Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Remember what? Not just the Sabbath, but to remember to keep it holy. Remember who our God is. Remember our Creator. Remember that He loves us, that He gave us this wonderful gift of rest. How do we remember then? If Sabbath is a time to remember, how do we remember our Creator? How do we remember the rest that He is offering us? Well, most simply, we do it as Jesus did. We do it through worship. Luke 4:16, Jesus traveled to Nazareth where He had grown up. On the Sabbath day, He went to the synagogue as He always did and stood up to read. See, Jesus made it a regular habit to practice Sabbath with other like-minded people in worship. That's what He did. It was a regular habit for Him to worship, to be reminded of who God is, what God stands for, and to rest in God. Sabbath reminds us to seek first the kingdom of God. That whenever we recognize there's a God and I am not Him, we begin to worship that God even more deeply because we understand that we need God more than anything else. So Sabbath is a day to remember. It's a time to remember. All week long, we are harassed by the urgent. All week long, that the urgent is always showing up, whether it's through our coworkers or employees, whether it's just through people coming into our life of saying, you got to take care of this now. This is urgent. We need one day a week where we remember to put in perspective what is urgent and what is most important. Because there's often a difference, right? We need a day where we remember what is most important in this world. Sabbath reminds us what is most important. The final purpose of Sabbath that I want to share with you this morning is Sabbath is a form of resistance. We need to push back from the narratives of our culture. Because our culture is trying to sell us on a narrative that you are only worth what you provide. You are only worth what you put into it. But see, God's narrative is very different. You are worth something because God said you are. He said you are before you even thought that you were worth anything yourself. And so whenever we practice Sabbath, we are pushing back against the narratives of our world. When the children of Israel finally are entering the promised land, Moses re-gives the 10 Commandments to them. Kind of as a reminder, because this is the next generation whenever we come to the book of Deuteronomy. So he re-gives the 10 Commandments. And whenever he gets to the Sabbath, he explains it differently. Where in Exodus he explains it because of creation, notice what he does in Deuteronomy. He says, remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and the Lord God brought you out of there by his great power and strength. So the Lord your God has commanded you to rest on the Sabbath day. He is grounding Sabbath in liberation. He says, you know what it's like to work for a taskmaster. You know what it's like to be a slave where your only value is in what you produce. But Sabbath pushes back against that narrative and says, you are worth so much more. You are worth because God has made you worthy. He created you in his image. And you don't need some boss, some company, some culture to say you are worth something. Because God has already told you you are. Every week, our culture pushes us to do more. Whether it's our jobs, our kids' activities, our schools, or even the things we volunteer for, even things like church. You are pushed to do more and more and more. And every week, you're asked to give more and more and more. But you can only pour out so much if you're not being filled up. You can only give as much as you've been given. And so thank God we serve a God that wove within the fabric of our being, in the whole world around us, this need to be filled up to overflowing. My cup overflows with the goodness of God. But for our cup to overflow, we have to take a break. We have to rest. We have to follow Jesus' lead in honoring the Sabbath. And remember, don't be legalistic, it's not simply a day, it's a way. So I want to give you 4 options to consider this week. You can do all 4 of them. You can do, honestly, I'm not going to grade you on this. You can do none of them. But I'm going to recommend 4 options for you to live out and get a better habit of Sabbath in your life. Here's one. Make worshiping with the saints a priority each week. It's what Jesus did. So just simply follow Jesus. His example had the lifestyle of Jesus. And I know I'm preaching to the crowd here a little bit of saying, oh yeah, like I'm already here. Great, but make it a priority. What does that mean? What does that look like? How much are you preparing to come and worship with the saints? Are you doing anything in prep before you come here to deal with the messiness of church family as it can be? Make worshiping with the saints a priority. Second is be intentional about being off work. I don't know what that means for you. Some of you are really good at saying, hey, whenever I'm going home, boom, I'm done. I'm not going to do it. I'm not bringing any work home. But see, the thing is, your mind is still on work. So when your kids try to do something with you or try to get your attention, you are either zoned out on some game because you're trying to quiet the voice of work in your mind or whatever might be happening. And so you're saying, well, I don't bring work home, but you really do, and everyone else can see it. Some of you, you're on call with your phone the whole time, even when you don't have to be. And if you're part of a work that requires you to be on call all the time, it's not healthy. Find a place, find a way to create some space to be intentionally off work. And even if you're retired, there's places in which you are on call but not actually being filled up. Number 3 is make some space every week to do something that fills your cup. This can be very personal for you, but I'm also going to say this is a day for the Lord. So do something in the Lord that fills your cup. Find something that it is, whatever it may be, that fills your cup, and just delight in it. Because I believe everything that God has given is a gift from the Lord, and so find a way and delight in it. If it's cross-stitch, great. Cross-stitch for the Lord. I don't know if we can make a slogan out of that, but that idea, do it for the Lord. The fourth one is probably going to be the hardest for a good chunk of us. Create tech-free times and zones. Give your tech a timeout. Put it in a corner. Turn it off. Don't let it have any influence in your life. In your household, there's a time, there's a place, there's a space in which no tech happens. What does that look like? You'll be blessed if you do that. I guarantee you. It's not that all tech is evil. It's just too much tech saps your soul. Use it wisely. So I don't know what it is that you need to do this week to get a little bit more rest. But I think Scripture encourages, challenges us that Sabbath idea, the flow of Sabbath is not gone. It is needed every bit today as it was for Adam and Eve. We need to be a people that understand that there's a rhythm in this life, woven into the fabric of creation, a rhythm that needs to take a break. And so whatever it is that you might need in your break this week, I challenge you to do it hand in hand with the Holy Spirit. Do it with God. And let your soul be filled. And if you're in need of anything, whether it be prayers, whether it just be praise, or just be surrounded by the saints, this invitation's for you. Would you let your needs known as we stand and sing?